Welcome to the School of Custody. I'm Tamara, founder of the School of Custody, and we're dedicated to reducing the impact of divorce on children. Our mission is to protect kids from the conflict, abuse, and one of the most insidious forms of child abuse, parental alienation. Our recordings will share insights, strategies, expert guidance to help families navigate custody challenges with their children's best interest at heart. Like, share, and subscribe so that more families can find this crucial information. And if you sign up for emails at our website, you'll receive a free booklet on alienating behaviors plus updates on new recordings and upcoming courses. School of Custody offers one-on-one divorce coaching, custody evaluation preparation, parenting plan mediation, and for more information on personalized support, please see our website. Let's work together to create a healthier future for children of divorce. Now, let's dive in. Disclaimer: this recording is for informational purposes only. If you need a therapist, please consult a licensed therapist in your area. And if you need legal advice, please consult a licensed attorney in your jurisdiction. Last week, I met someone at a social function, and she described to me how she was concerned about her neighbor who had just left a domestic violence relationship, and how she was concerned about the welfare of the victim, but also of the children. And I explained a little bit to her about my background in crisis intervention training and serving on the Child Abuse Prevention Council, and how I just founded the School of Custody. And I wanted to help give her some pointers or things that she could do to be helpful to her neighbor and just be supportive. And the first thing is that a victim really needs is just to have someone to listen to them, to be seen, heard, and validated. Another thing that they really need is income. Frequently, they've been isolated or not allowed to work, or their work has been impacted by the violence in the situation. And so they need resources to be able to support themselves and their children. They need understanding. They just need someone to be there, to hold their hand, to have a cup of tea with them. They don't need somebody to tell them what to do. They just need someone to be there. So as a supporter of a person with domestic violence, you can look up the local nonprofits that help domestic violence and sexual assault victims and provide them with the information, encourage them to get help. Many of these organizations have tons of resources available to help the victims through transition. They also work collaboratively with other nonprofits to help support the family. Frequently, this is done in way of wraparound services, helping them find a job, helping them find clothing for their future employment, helping the kids get therapy. There's so much that can be done, and reaching out to the organizations is a good place to start and help. In this case, the children also witnessed the domestic violence, and the impact of witnessing abuse on a child is devastating. Domestic abuse undermines a child's basic need for safety and security, and it can have a serious effect on their long-term behavior, their brain development, educational outcomes, and just overall well-being. If a teacher found out that there was domestic violence at home, they have to report it to child welfare services. This is called a mandated report. A nurse, a doctor, clergy, all these people are what's called mandated reporters. As a neighbor, you're not a mandated reporter. You don't have to report things. And sometimes it's dangerous to do so because reporting will often let the perpetrator know by seeing the details of the report, they can figure out who made the report. Now, perpetrating domestic violence in front of children is a separate and additional crime in a few states such as Delaware, Georgia, and Utah. And witnessing domestic abuse for a child, of course, is devastating. The impact of witnessing this can just completely undermine the child's basic need for safety and security. And it can have a serious impact on their long-term behavior, their brain development, educational outcomes, and their overall well-being. That's why there's a system of mandated reporting. A mandated reporter would be a police officer that is making an arrest for domestic violence. It could also be a teacher that's been told by the child of reportable offenses, and these all get turned over to child welfare services. Child welfare services collaborates with local nonprofits to provide resources to the victim and help the family move through the trauma that they're going through. There's also criminal charges. So if there's a domestic violence arrest, unfortunately, about 95%, it just depends on the jurisdiction, don't get prosecuted. What the actual prosecution rates are, unfortunately, they are very, very low. And part of the reason for this is it's a he said, she said crime. It's really hard to ascertain what actually happened. And frequently, the only witnesses are children. And district attorneys won't pull in children to court. Sometimes when they're over the age of 14, they will have to go into court and testify, but younger children, it makes it way less likely. Having a criminal conviction of the perpetrator is helpful to the victim when they are asking for child custody. There's two different courts that would hear something when there's been a domestic violence arrest. First, the criminal court, because they have perpetrated crimes on the person of another by way of the domestic abuse. But then the victim, if they're trying to leave the perpetrator and have custody of their children, needs to do that through the family court. So there's two separate courts that are here. There's a different standard on the criminal court than there is on the family court. So a criminal conviction takes showing beyond a reasonable doubt, and in the family court, the showing needs to be more likely than not. So it's super important that the victim of domestic violence cooperates with the district attorney to help get a conviction. And the conviction also forces the perpetrator to get resources. They can be rehabilitated. They have to be forced into their anger management courses, therapy, or whatever it is that is going to motivate them to change. And those changes need to happen before the child custody has any change in it. So again, the victim needs to cooperate with the district attorney. In the past, and this is changing, it probably still happens in some areas, victims have actually been put in prison for not cooperating with the prosecution of their perpetrators. And there's been a lot of statute changes to disallow that because it's one of the hardest things for a victim to do. It's important to get the criminal sentencing to protect the children. Now, teachers, nurses, doctors, clergy may find out about domestic abuse where there hasn't even been an arrest. Maybe the child shared with the teacher something that was going on at home. They're required to report these things and they get turned in to child welfare services. It can be risky for the person making a report, but again, someone like a teacher, they're mandated, they have to report these things, and it's to protect the children. Now, what are signs or indicators that a child is witnessing domestic violence? They can have a change in their just overall behavior. They might start having ambivalent feelings toward the abuser. Sometimes they actually align with the abuser and stand behind them because they know that's the safest place to be. And they may have frequent sicknesses, or they may not want to go to school because they want to stay home to protect mom, or they may be frustrated, or they may take on the aggressions of the aggressive parent. They might start bullying peers at school because that's what they've seen happen. They might start having bedwetting, or they may have drug or alcohol use if they're older and they're a teen. They may pull back from peers and not be involved. And it's just an absolutely devastating thing for a child to go through witnessing this. Older children, such as teenagers, can start acting out, and they might just start skipping school. They might have low self-esteem. They might find it difficult to be around friends because they don't want their friends to find out what's going on. And the long-term consequences on children obviously are very devastating to their mental health. They can have anxiety issues. They can develop eating disorders. They have a lower sense of self-worth. They can have alcohol and drug use problems, and they're at extreme risk for repeating these behaviors themselves, especially as they age and enter relationships in their own domestic life. Children that have witnessed domestic violence when they grow up are at a higher risk of relationship issues later in life. They also have a higher percentage of being alienated or estranged from a parent as they become adults. These are all the reasons that we need to get children the resources and help as soon as possible, as soon as people find out about it, as soon as there's arrest, a report to child welfare services. We have to wrap this family in resources so as to prevent the long-term pain for these children and promote a better outcome. So where are some of the resources that can help families? First, and I will say here, women aren't the only victims of domestic abuse. However, they are about 90 to 95% of the victims. So now that we've just briefly touched on some of the issues that come up for victims and the children during a domestic violence situation, we need to look at where the resources are. So if there's been a police report where there's been an arrest, then one of the resources that a lot of people don't know about is victim funds. And it depends, obviously, on your jurisdiction. But in some cases, the victim funds pay for the medical bills of the victim so that they can recover. And that would be for injuries, but also for therapeutic assistance. And this would extend to the children witnesses of the crime. So that's a great place to get therapy funds for the children. Another is to contact organizations that support victims of child abuse and domestic violence. Frequently, these organizations collaborate with many other resources, including child welfare services, school districts, hospitals, to get victims resources that they need. They frequently have on staff therapists that are trained specifically in the issues that the victim and the children are dealing with. So these are things that you could help point out to somebody that you're supporting through a domestic violence situation. And if you've been through it, reach out to as many nonprofits in your area that support victims as possible and utilize the resources that are available to you. If this is your story or that of someone that you know and care about, know it's okay to utilize resources. That's why these resources are available. You're not the one who should be ashamed of taking resources or for what happened. It's the perpetrator that should be ashamed for what they did, not you. I hope this helps. I hope that every child and victim of domestic violence can transcend the trauma that they've gone through. And there's a lot of people that are out there to help you. Please reach out and utilize these important resources.